Right, welcome everyone. We're going to get started. This is meeting of the Shellfish Advisory Panel. Eric Schneider is filling in for Anna, and it was a pretty full agenda. So let's get going. Up first, we have the aquaculture application for Roger Williams.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Getch. I'm the aquaculture coordinator for the CRMC. Just going to give a brief introduction to this application for your review. But this is the location. If you're there, the Roger Williams campus. You see the dorms here. They have a learning platform that extends off the shore. And this area has been pretty much in continuous use for research in various projects involving aquaculture demonstration and research since probably 2006. Was identified a need to kind of update that research permit to encompass all the different kinds of activities that were happening at this area. Some of you may be familiar with the Roger Williams extension work that's been done with quahog, particularly the stocking, quahogs in the use of the program in Warwick Cove with the Shellfish Association. University also works with the town of Warren, raising oysters for public enhancement areas. So this is kind of an extension of some of that work where they can do more research on various things. It's a little less than an acre or 2 acres, about 1.78. It is in conditional waters. There will be no sale of product from this location. It is a research permit in that sense. However, the standard for a CRMC research permit is usually limited to 1,000 square feet, which is clearly larger than that. Is one reason why we're treating it as a full application and bringing it before you as we would any aquaculture application. We did not do a shellfish survey, and that's simply because the area already has a lot of different activities, and as I said, it's been used for well over a decade for research. We did have a PD meeting in the town of Bristol. Some of you, I think, were present for that meeting. It was a productive meeting with the town and some of the fishing community from that area. Some of the changes that were made between the PD and the full application were based on recommendations from the town and the fishermen. One of the things to note is the eastern boundary of the site does not extend further than the learning platform pier. That was identified as something that would help fishermen as they may be setting pots along this outer edge. There's also going to be hazard buoys, kind of like your standard white, orange, small can. They already have one hazard buoy off the pier, which marks the intake for their hatchery. These would be similar in size and in nature. There would be a few along the eastern edge and on the northern corners, but importantly, there would be 2 buoys in the middle here that would act as a private aids to navigation, which would mark an area that would be used for only bottom planting where there would be no gear, and this would allow access to the shore. And also it would accommodate the sailing team, I believe, from the university would also need to traverse this area further down. The next slide, I think, has a little more detail on the proposed layout. And so you can see various types of gear and structure within the area. It's everything from floating beds to the Australian longline systems, kelp culture, bottom plant, fat bags, tailor floats, really just a the full kind of range of aquaculture gear that we see. And this would allow them to experiment with these different types of gear, so, you know, for the research purposes. There is also, as you can see, quite an inclusive list of species that they're looking to study. You know, these include the common species, eastern oyster, hard clams, quahogs, bay scallops, but also, you know, some other maybe lesser utilized or emerging species for aquaculture, such as surf clams, razor clams, soft shell clams, etc. Also, there's some interest in experimenting with different types of seaweeds, such as sugar kelp, gracilaria, and dulse. I would mention that they've included a fairly long list of species to give them flexibility in the research. However, you know, if any changes that aren't included in this permit were to happen later on, that would be considered a modification. We bring it back for public notice if need be. And with that, I can turn it over to you guys for questions, comments. We have Tim Scott from the university who can speak on the university's point of view on this. Yeah.
I have a question. On the in between E and D on there, which I would call it the west side of that dock, we have the spat bags hanging off.
On this side?
Yeah, when you came to the Bristol Harbor Commission meeting, you agreed to not have that stuff on that side of the dock.
Yeah, and so that was that. So the public notice period for the 30 days. Thank you for reminding me of this detail. We extended that public notice, I think by almost a month, to allow the town to weigh in. There was discussion about that, and yes, the university agreed that they would have no gear on this side of the pier. Is that correct, Tim?
Yes.
Yeah. So that would be a condition of the permit. As you can see, the plans do indicate there would be some things there. We could easily stipulate that in the final approval that the site would not.
Maybe an older image.
Yeah, in
They
that,
updated that image.
yeah, I could check that might have been just an oversight in making the slide. But yes, to be clear, the southern boundary of the site would essentially be the northern side of the pier.
Does that pier exist?
Yes, it does. Yeah. And it's a learning platform.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really nice.
So.
Hi, I'm Cam, from Ocean State Aquaculture Association. And I was wondering, bay scallop studies. Do you think we'll have room for that in like May?
We actually tried.
Maybe not this year, but maybe the following
No,
year.
absolutely, yeah, that's definitely a target.
That would be a great time of year to get them.
We, yeah, so we have a fully integrated package at the university for shellfish. We have a hatchery, we have a nursery system. We have a microalgae greenhouse, and we wanted to add this farm. And what makes it a difficult application, I think, is simply the versatility that we're trying to build into it. We're not going to be producing for sale. I mean,
Right.
we've already made that agreement. And so we want to have the opportunity, though, to try different things that maybe we think of, but also try different things that you guys think of. Right? So we've always tried to work with the shellfish community to solve problems that you guys are facing. Maybe it's development of a new species, maybe it's new techniques. So we couldn't necessarily put everything in the application that we might be doing, but we tried. That's why the species worked for so long.
Yeah.
I think our biggest challenge specifically with bay scallops is the hatcheries aren't producing them at the time of year we need to avoid mortality.
Right.
So we're working with Cornell right now, but we need, somebody more local to perhaps teach our local commercial hatcheries as growers put the demand on them and pass the buck to them.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. And we've grown them before. We've grown them successfully. We did try a small batch not too long ago, but we're actually in between personnel right now. Dale Levitt ran our program for many years, as many of you know him. He retired, and we hired a replacement, Skylar Bear. She left last summer to go take a job with Noah up in Alaska. So we're actually looking for two new faculty positions to replace the shellfish. One to focus on the field aspects and one to focus on the hatchery aspects. those won't be filled until the fall. And so this spring, we're not actually producing anything. We're doing maintenance on the facility, to try to bring it up. It's only 12 years old. So, once we get going, though, we're gonna.
We're covered. Cornell's got us this year, but we don't want to go too far.
It's down in Long Island?
Yep,
Yep.
Kim,
Sure,
thank you.
it was great.
Oh, Steve.
Because this is a conditional area, do you have a plan for harvest or do you have a full DEM? Because you will be harvesting market size shellfish.
We do, and of course, we don't sell them, but we
Right.
do consume them ourselves. We donate them to nonprofit groups. The Charleston Seafood Show, I think we fed that one, right? So, we follow the regulations with respect to conditional waters. And if we can't harvest, we can't harvest. That happens periodically.
And will you have to notify DEM when you're on your farm when the area is closed like other farms have to do?
I think that is in there, yes. For a while since I read it, unfortunately, but I think that is in
Yeah, the standard protocol usually is they notify me and then I'll send a note to DM enforcement. But yeah, that would be a condition. Obviously, it's not a commercial operation. The harvest that does happen won't be that often. I would expect that, they might be out there doing research during periods when it's closed, but because it's not a commercial operation, it is a lower risk perhaps to public health, but yeah, they would follow the same rules as anybody.
It is concerning because there is a lot of access to the area and how many thousands of students are able to access that platform. Just the attractive nuisance aspect of the farm is concerned. So,
the platform is locked most of the time.
and for the sailing team as well?
When there's a program running, it's open. But
Hmm.
for the most of the time, it's locked. There's a security camera down the public safety does monitor. And most of right now, we only have a few racks of oysters in there. They're submerged, they're closed in, so we've never had a problem with that. Actually, it's more difficult. Try getting my undergraduates to eat oysters. That's kind of the harder problem.
Hmm.
Kids these days can't get them to eat oysters. What the hell is their problem?
So we need a seafood marketing campaign. Yeah.
Well, if there isn't any more discussion, if anyone on the panel wants to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to
Motion
approve.
made by Kim Minutes, sorry, what's your motion?
It's not approved, it's not denied. I don't see any conflict of use. Correct?
To not object?
I do not object to the
Right,
separation.
or wait, technically a recommendation to CRMC on the consistency of the application with the pursuit of the various missions in the state.
What on that is?
I'm not making any big this.
That's a new one.
That's in the law.
We're getting in trouble because we have to say that object.
No, I forgot my piece of paper.
Must be because it's Roger White. Well, legal.
Okay, so motion made by Cam to recommend.
I can read it. So Ben, with your assistance, the new recommendation to CRMC for consent with the application.
Yeah, that works. Yeah. Ultimately, what we're looking for from the SAP and the Fishery Council in general is the recommendation to CRMC on the application with regards to the consistency and the pursuit of the marine fisheries. But I'll take it as it stands. It's fine.
We have a second?
Sure.
Second by Brennan. We have discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to a vote. All in favor? Please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the motion passes unanimously. 10-0. Right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank Thank
very much.
you.
Thank you.
Oh.
I didn't see your hand, so.
I'm a little guy again.
No, by no means, just making sure you have your opportunity. So the next item is we're gonna get an update on the Greenwich Bay transplant. And Dave, were you willing to give that quick update?
Sure, so, we're looking to do the transplant out of East Greenwich this time. Okay, and, we're trying to coordinate with DEM to get the sampling done. It's supposed to go tomorrow, but, got bumped back till about the end of the month due to scheduling conflicts. Last year, we had about $34,000 or thereabouts in funding. We had 44 guys come out to the transplant, and that was held in Apponaug Cove. And we averaged about $15 a bag. We paid the guys $15 a bag. So we're hoping to do the same this year. We're hoping to give the guys about $15 a bag. With what we spent, about $19,000, that leaves us just around 15 or thereabouts in funding. So we asked the DEM to contribute again so that we could get more funding to again pay the guys about $15 a bag. We expect somewhere around the 40 to 50, 40 to 50 guys number. Again, that's usually seems to be about the norm. And that's about it. We're looking at May 2nd, it's Tuesday. We want to get in there earlier for a couple of reasons, but one of them in particular in regards to East Greenwich is the mooring field that starts to fill up pretty quickly. And if it stays warmer, it's been pretty warm this year, they're probably going to start filling up quicker. So if we can get in there, the sooner the better to get that done. And that's about it. We may also ask if we can do sampling in Apponaug just as a backup, and just in case East Greenwich doesn't pan out, we can, so we don't have to start the process all over again, And right now I'm the one scheduled to do the sampling. So that's about all I have on that.
Go ahead. Ken.
I was gonna ask, and thanks, Dave. The DEM's been working with NBC to get an extra 5K to supplement the transplant, so
Beautiful.
hopefully that's about 20K. So I'm hoping that covers us.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, normally what we do is if we have a greater number, we cap the amount that the guys can take so that everybody, still does well, but we're trying to keep it to the $15 a bag. And it's a dig and dump. And, that seems to work very, very well. Logistically, and the guys seem to like it a lot more too.
And where are the quahogs going this year?
Well, from what I was told, last year they kept us, I'm not, excuse me, I get confused with the areas, they change all the time, but we were kept towards the north shore of by Baker's Creek in that north shore, in that area of Greenwich Bay. And now they said, or what I was told was that we could dump them anywhere within eastern Greenwich. Would be okay. Again, I have to defer to Connor on that. So
All of those
I'm
things.
sorry, western side, not
Yeah,
eastern side. I'm sorry, western side.
Yeah, I don't know if we chatted about spots specific, yeah, but
Okay.
I would think similar to last year, but I guess it's still open for discussion if there's feedback from the staff.
Well, I know last year, a big part of it was enforcement. They wanted to keep us closer so that, guys, because everybody was leaving at one time and it can get kind of tough for them to try and keep a handle on everybody as well. So they kept us to that North Shore side so that they could, kind of monitor and see where everybody was. So, we have to probably coordinate with enforcement and figure out where that would lie.
A question, how much time between the time the quahogs are released wherever they're going to be released till the potential first open to harvest
Probably like 6 months.
6 months? And is that 6 months where there's potentially going through a hefty phytoplankton bloom?
I mean, theoretically, yeah. I mean, in the, like the summer bloom, it won't be the winter, spring. But
Right.
if there is another bloom in the summer in the upper bay.
Yeah.
So there would be, I guess as it relates to, food or productivity, there would be some.
Okay,
But we try and do it earlier in the spring because we need, I think it's 2 to 3 weeks of no rain, so they fully depurate.
right. Yeah, because what I'm kind of getting at is basically the clams coming out of there are about as thin and sort of non-reproductive as you can get, largely for being there. And then if we can get them to sort of bulk up and at least get a period of potential spawn out of them, that would be a good plus on this effort.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, I mean, you may know better than me, but the ability for them to spawn after being moved and dropped, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I don't know if we've ever studied that, so.
Yeah, but I think we have a better bet if they've had a good chance to be able to feed, bulk and have a good chance to bulk up. And it may be 6 months. Yeah, so that's the kind of the basic question.
So traditionally, the past transplants would have the outer part where the mouth of the cove, where the clams were typically relayed from. So the condition index, if I'm wrong, where it's always better way closer to the mouth, and that's
Oh,
what
absolutely.
we use. So
Exactly, yeah. That's what we want.
Maybe it's sort of along the line of thinking, I was wondering, with aquaculture people here, is it feasible at all to actually, in conjunction with transplanting from coves to be seeded? So that you get the smaller stuff growing in full life cycle from whatever side you would aquaculture would start on. Does anybody consider that?
Sort of a novice, but it's 3 to 5 years, right, under the stand,
But in
so.
terms of the expense and in conjunction with transplanting, could there also be?
Christian and Mary and Charlton, he said mostly so we would have to.
You need to close an area down and seed it for several years. You get a full spectrum. Most of the transplant stuff is quite chunky. And it's within the range of top max 15 cents. It seems like it'd be nice to see some real small stuff seeded.
To my knowledge, the Shellfish Association is still operating up water to the lower cove. Correct. And seeding, aquaculture seed, which I believe is coming from Providence University. And that is spread every year in various areas.
Right, but the mortality rate on those is relatively high. The basis of the transplant is that, yes, to help repopulate the area, but it's also to help give the fishermen something to work on during the winter months. So unfortunately, we don't have an option whether the product is bigger or smaller. Okay, years ago in Greenwich, the product that we were taking out was very, very small, beautiful stuff. But when there was a lapse in time with transplanting, plus the stuff grew, and it gets stunted because it's so thick that now they're all about the size of a small top. What we have to do is get rid of that layer so that this stuff can now reproduce inside the coves. we do, as Dennis said, we try to stay towards the mouth of the coves, like in Apponaug, we were in Mary's Creek area. And we didn't go much further than the beginning of Dickinson's Marina, okay? And this year, we're looking from Division Street out to do the transplanting. Okay, so again, towards the outer part of the cove. And it's, you know, it would be nice if we could recruit the small ones, but in reality, it's very hard to try and pick what we can do, you know, and what we can get out of the coves. So to thin the coves out so they can reproduce is kind of it's a double-edged type of a thing. The other thing that again, now talking about the industry and the guys that work it, is, you know, in the middle of February, we're not real picky about exactly what we're bringing up in the rate, because the rest of the day is, you know, a lot of times is unworkable because of weather conditions. So this is really what kind of feeds a lot of families during the winter months in regards to, you know, industry wise.
I wasn't objecting to transplanting at all. I just, a lot of that stuff's chunky, and I just didn't know the feasibility of having a seeding program in the area, closing down part of it and seeding it for several years. And to me, that would establish, I don't know what the mortality is of that, and I'm not into aquaculture, but.
Yeah,
So we do, I'm sorry.
I was going to add that, yeah, if you planting, you know, plant seed, which is coming out of an upweller, which you can really only grow to like 8 millimeters,
Right.
maybe,
Right.
feet, tiny, you know, smaller than feet.
Right.
And you put that, you know, you point that out in the field. If you don't cover it with predator netting, or you have some other way to exclude predators.
So on a
you're
large
gonna lose the
scale,
vast
it's not
majority.
very profitable.
Well,
Yeah,
no.
I just-
No, and not to interrupt, but one of the things that I've been a part of for many years is the upweller and the seeding program. So I've had a chance to see how that pans out over time. What I have found is that it is about a 3 to 5 years before we see anything from that. We set seed in the mouth of Wallet Cove, oh God, for years. And just last year, we started to see guys actually being able to catch the nice little nets. And we put, sometimes we had notatas put in so we could make sure that was that type of, it was directly from what we planted.
This
Okay,
is on the closed part of World Code.
well, it's conditional, it's a conditional area, okay? So what we found is that, again, due to predation, you know, and high mortality rates, that it's a very slow and long process. It's one we really embrace it. You know, we get the upweller going every year. We do a lot with seeds. We even do it with oysters as well. We've done millions of oyster seed all up and down and inside, you know, towards Oakland Beach area and all the North Shore for public, for everybody. And the return on that has been not as well as we'd like to see, again, because to your point, they're very, very small when we put them in, and it's hard for them to actually take hold.
I have a question. Is there adequate phytoplankton?
Well, that's a good question. That's one that's been going around and around and around. What we think is happening bay-wide is that they don't have enough to eat. And we see that, and that's a discussion for another time, I guess, but we see that coming from the south part of the bay, where guys used to work and earn a living every day, up into the north part. It seems that the food point source is moving further north. So to have a seeding project, say, even in Greenwich, and have a big success would be hard, because we need to find out whether they have anything to eat anyway, you know, and that's been discussion that's been had and continues to be had, especially amongst the fishermen that do it every day. Yeah.
I think dissolved oxygen in the western part of Greenwich, especially now some of these warmer periods, is a big problem for little ones.
Mhm.
You know, whether they're seeded or wild, they take a beating when this thing drops that much.
Mhm.
Is there enough nitrogen in the
Well,
water?
Yeah, I think food, I don't think it's food limited as much as oxygen stress, you know, adults don't do as well, and some of them, I think the inner cones are even worse. the outer coves, are basically unsafe for human consumption, but clams are generally healthy, but if you get that warm slug of weather, like some of the monitoring that's been done, that oxygen really drops off at night, and sometimes in those summer periods, and little ones take a beat, and the big ones tough.
And we're seeing a lot more, mortality in the southern part of even B area. I went down there and I fished and I took some home to see what the meat was like inside. And literally on a hog, on a big one, it looked like the size of a good top neck, the meat inside. Yeah, they were very small meat, but yet if you go up into the Providence River, it was so healthy, the shell, you open up the little neck and it was almost the same size as the meat that I pulled out of a hog. Yeah, so it's been an ongoing discussion, but, anyway, that's right, after the transplant. Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
we'll take one more question. and
I
then-
just had, we keep throwing it around on the voluntary transplant. What is the chances of, because there was a lot of guys that said that they'd like to go up on a voluntary basis. I know it's a enforcement thing, and just curious if there's any discussion, Connor, on your end, as far as adding a voluntary transplant.
I don't think we're not opposed to it. I think it's about where and when, really. I think we've been fortunate the last few years that we've had funds to support transplants, so we haven't gone that route, but in the.
Well, we have one paid that's probably gonna suck up all the money, but there seems to be, this dig and dump thing is awesome, like it used to be many, many moons ago.
Yeah,
But this dig and dump thing is really good, and a lot of guys like it.
a few years, we did one in East Bay a few years ago too, right? A smaller one, voluntary. So yeah, I'm open to it. We can coordinate with water and enforcement. But
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's a great idea, actually, the more that we can
What
get.
what time, what kind of a time frame from the original, from the association's, projected, the May 2nd one? How long between, that date, we dump them so that it wouldn't screw up the, the closure of the clarity of them?
Yeah, I think it's tied to that depuration thing, right?
Right, so I don't want to do one like 3 weeks later if it's going to screw up the first dump,
Which is what we almost ran into a couple years ago, right?
So I would like, it have to be within the same time, so.
And I think it was Dave, you mentioned it, like avoiding mooring fields and just trying to make sure it's.
But we don't have to do it there, we could do the other one in Apple too, so that's wide open.
Yeah, and I think probably a cycle either around the bay or around coves, that's to not over deplete one.
Well, yeah, one of the things, the reason we're going back to these Greenwich is because we kind of didn't want to overdo Appanog. But Appanog could be a good backup if he's finished.
So should do the both,
Maybe,
both for you and Mike, you guys
yeah, how about
kick
maybe,
it around?
yeah, maybe we could get a meeting, something,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Just water quality wise, all the coves around Greenwich meet the restricted standard of the NSSP, which is what we need for this kind of relay. So once you have areas in mind, just let water know, we can double check them.
No, but I was thinking either or Greenwich or Appanog, because that's just too local, that's just so convenient.
Yeah.
If it gets a little snotty, you can just get out and dump the stuff without having issues going across the bay.
Bacteria level wise, I think just from memory, and I haven't looked at it super recently, I think it would meet the standards, so it should be
Awesome.
eligible.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next item, Shellfish Restoration Enhancement Plan. That's Eric.
Right. Okay, hi everyone, I'm Eric Schneider. I'm just going to give you a brief update on the Shellfish Restoration and Enhancement Plan. Well, I talked, maybe I could ask you guys if you haven't signed in, to sign in, because you don't quite need to give me the attention that you'll give the next speakers. So many of you might have been able to tune into a online kickoff event we had last week. And if not, that's fine. I mean, the 60-second rundown is that the Division of Marine Fisheries in partnership with a number of partners and collaborators on the bottom, as well as other entities in DEM, including Office of Water, Division of Law Enforcement, are initiating the statewide planning process to develop a restoration and enhancement plan for shellfish. So this is for all shellfish species. And, really, we're looking to establish kind of a new way of doing this. In the past, you'll know that the division has developed a proposal, and then, we've worked with stakeholders and we've brought it to the SAP and others to get feedback. And we're kind of flipping that around where we're going out to stakeholders as really the first cut to find out, really what do you all value, prioritize, and what do you want to see done? And so that's going to be, I'll get to that in just a minute. And to kind of have a more holistic plan that really considers the needs of stakeholders and managers, more fully addresses the ecological and social complexities of our shellfish system, not just restoration, but our complete shellfish ecosystem, and ultimately improves outreach and engagement. And so rather than droning on, the kickoff event was recorded. There's a lot more information on our website. It's just risrep.org. So you or anyone online can check that out. Yeah, it's like thanks. So overall, this planning process, like I said, is a little different than in the past. It is a participatory planning process where we're really looking to stakeholders to work with us, and work together to help co-develop or develop in cooperation the priorities and goals for this plan. It really leans on the local knowledge and insight that you all and other stakeholders have on the resource, the uses and challenges that occur in specific areas. And ultimately, we want this process to provide meaningful opportunities for stakeholders to contribute early on. As I mentioned, the kind of the standard way of doing this, a lot and kind of the broad swath of stakeholders get to chime in at the end. Here, we're trying to give an opportunity, really meaningful opportunity to contribute right up front. Obviously, we're trying to leverage partnerships, local knowledge, expertise. Really try to emphasize and strategically build, collective social capital motivation as we move through. And so real quickly, there's the simple processes that we're going to follow to develop this plan. And this is not a management plan. This is a guidance plan that will later help feed and inform management, but it's not our standard management process. So we've been working to develop a process. We will continue to develop that process with feedback from stakeholders. But while we're finishing the development, we're also collecting information that includes existing information as well as new information. Both you could think of more ecological or biological information, but also social information. We'll use that information, we'll analyze it, we'll summarize that in a draft plan. We'll get more feedback. And then ultimately that resolves in a finalized plan. And so the next step that everyone should be informed of is a series of in-person workshops. And so those workshops are happening just next week. And so I have the dates on the next slide, but what these are is a series of professionally facilitated small group meetings. So we're looking for stakeholders to come share their knowledge and their perspectives with us and help develop some draft restoration priorities and goals, really based on the broad ecosystem services that shellfish can provide. There's three primary objectives we're trying to address at these workshops. First, we're asking stakeholders to define and rank the restoration and enhancement priorities and goals for the spatial location that focuses for that workshop. Also describe any knowledge or information that you think we're missing to try to address that goal, and also provide feedback on the planning process in general. Like I said, there's 3 workshops planned right now. The first workshop is for the South Shore region from Watch Hill to Narrow River. The second workshop is the West Bay all the way up to the Peacock River. Both of those workshops occur here in this room next Monday and Tuesday. And then the third workshop is for the East Bay and the Secana River, and that occurs next Wednesday, and that's at the Common Fence Point Community Center. So really, what we want folks to do to prepare for that is really take a little time. You guys might not need as much time as others, but we want folks to think about, what is their vision for like a given system, a place they care about, what services do they value, what areas are most important to them, and ultimately, think about what you want, and asking you to take a step back from where we typically operate, which is what I expect to get, but actually just take the time and, take the risk to really think about, well, ultimately, what would I really like to see for that area? And you can bring that to those meetings, and there'll be people will share information, and they'll work together to at least develop some draft goals. And then we can, there'll be subsequent meetings, but those goals will help us identify, what potential approaches might be appropriate. And then we can work through all of the other information to try to evaluate whether, what might be possible to address those goals, how we would do it, what the trade-offs are, what the potential positives and negatives of those specific approaches. So really next steps for any stakeholder would be to check out our website, sign up for our listserv. If you can, register for those in-person meetings and certainly try to attend them in person. Registering is nothing more than giving us your name and your email, and it's really just giving us a head count. So when we're trying to set up these rooms, figure out how many co-facilitators we need, we have some idea whether there's 15 or 50 people showing up. And then, there will be next steps. Part of that's going to be based on your feedback, but at least a definitive next step is coming probably end of April or May. There will be an online survey, but this is going to be an ongoing process. And with that, I'm happy to take some questions, but I also, you can catch up with me after as well, because I don't want to take away from those subsequent presentations either.
I just have a quick question. Have municipalities been receptive at all to engaging in stakeholder meetings?
Some of them have.
Because I know they have a lot to say, regardless of whether they're there or not. I might as well get them in the room.
We've reached out directly to not all municipalities, but at least some of the municipalities. We're asking folks to kind of, help us spread the word. So if any of you engage with like a local town commission, by all means, please forward the notices that you see come out on our marine fisheries listserv for them to see. I know the South Shore municipalities, communities are engaged. They've given me some feedback that they're interested in participating.
Could you define what you mean by social capital? And how is that going to plug into the management considerations for the management areas?
Yeah, it's a good question. So social capital is essentially, there's a number of aspects, collective aspects that contribute to social capital. But you could think of it as what are the positive benefits, collective positive benefits that we would receive from participating. So if you're sitting there and evaluating, well, what's in it for me? I need to contribute some of my time. What am I going to get out of it? There's a number of aspects that we've tried to consider when developing this that would improve, you could think of the social capital or the personal benefit that you get out of it. And so one is the process of trying to allow folks to contribute early on so that their contribution, their knowledge is included up front, and that it funnels this way rather than us making a plan and then trying to adapt it or respond to comments at the end. It also gives folks the ability to, potentially, help shape what moves forwards rather than respond to what's proposed to move forwards. And so those are some of the personal ones, but it's also, what do you get out of it? If you're interested in, harvest, supplemental seeding, water quality, any of those social or cultural benefits that they provide. Those are all aspects that relate to kind of your
So
social capital.
these social concerns will affect, like, from my understanding, the DEM, the prerogative of the DEM is strictly the resource. They don't involve themselves, and so maybe some input from the advisory panel may have some considerations. This almost seems like that. I don't see really the difference. I've heard people talking about price and economic considerations at these meetings.
No, that's all.
This seems to be going in a furthering in the direction of social concerns, and I just don't quite see the difference between some of the discussions here, what this is proposing, and how will it affect the DEM on management decisions? Will it have a direct effect on the D? Because in my recollection, almost everything from the DEM has been strictly the resource.
Right, and I think one way to think about that is there are social attributes that contribute to, not just resource management decisions, but that collective shellfish social ecological system. So, like we talked about here, it's not just biology that govern what happens to shellfish in the bay. Human actions govern what happens to shellfish in the bay. And so in that recording, we do walk through, I think, the approach and what we mean by a social ecological system and how we consider both the ecological and social attributes. But in your collective fishery management, we do consider both sides of that. And that's
Okay, so on my own, it's a little confusing to me as how different to what we're doing here. We have several different people. We have people from the industry, people fishermen, with different concerns to the table. I'm just a little confused. I think right on my own. Okay, it's new to me and just concerned about the management concerns would produce.
Yes, sorry, Ben. I saw the kickoff meeting too. One of the things I took away was that this process will help inform a plan, but that plan isn't necessarily regulatory in nature. It could inform future regulation or priority management areas, but the plan itself is not a regulatory document.
Its guidance was my understanding from the presentation. It would guide the state if there were to be selected shellfish restoration efforts.
I thought it was specific in saying it would lead to guidance. It was not guidance yet, right?
The final plan would be guidance.
The final plan will be guidance.
Yeah, it's not a management plan. So just like the shellfish management plan was not, a quote unquote DEM management plan, but all of the information, outputs, recommendations can help inform future management. But it itself is not a management plan.
I guess my concern is that seems to me it could lead to like a mob rule kind of a thing and sacrifice an individual's interest. If I have a particular interest, it's particular to me, but you have a social group that's numerous people, they're going to be telling you what to do. I'm afraid of seeing like a mob rule mentality where the bigger the group is that you attach yourself to will give you the ability to dictate management decisions, which sacrifices individual use, sure.
Yeah,
That's my concern.
So under this process, your individual concern, will be captured, and I don't expect that, it's not just a consensus or majority voting in the end.
Well, say my concerns oppose a group of 10 people get together and stakeholders, and they all say we need this. And I say, well, I don't like that. That's not good for me at all. Seems like you're opening up, to me, the managing strictly the resources, to me, where management should be. And when you dial in social concerns and what you said, collective, you use that word several times, and I'm thinking on an individual basis. And the biggest groups, the biggest social groups get to go make the decisions. I'm just thinking maybe that's not where this is going, but that's what my fear is.
It's not a management thing, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I thought you said it.
If it's not a management thing, how is it? How can it be adverse? How can it affect us without us voting on it? Anything that goes from this to management, we have a say, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So this is designed to try to be blueprint, outline what those goals would be. Here's the approaches you could use to address those goals. Here's walking through, a collective analysis And again, I don't want to rehash the whole kickoff meeting, but, the goal was, the idea is to try to outline, the potential impacts, the positive aspects of them, so that then when someone says, okay, I'd like to do this, a lot of the work has already been done. You guys aren't starting from scratch. You can look to that guidance document to try to better understand, what are the positive and negative aspects of that, but it would still then move through.
No, he was worried about becoming management and be kind of dictating what's gonna happen. It's not, that's not gonna happen unless we have a vote that's gonna come,
So it's advisory
like
to this now, that your group would be subject to this group's approval, at least at this stage, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's advisory to the management process, and we.
So you can't go straight to manage, the SREP will never go straight to say the DEM to produce legislation or changes without this group approval.
And this is according to the Fisheries Council.
Yeah. So
Clarify really
what's
quick.
that advisory to? I mean, that's my question. Is this gonna produce regulations on this SREP?
No, it won't. It's
directed.
no.
Not directly, because I don't see the point of it if it doesn't.
I think one of the challenges we face is not having a clear idea of both biological and social considerations for doing restoration projects. We oftentimes have identified places that are successful for biological reasons and have been not moved forward because of the opposition from various groups, municipalities, primarily. And so what we're trying to do is in the future, as we try, if and when we do restoration, we are more thoughtful in the process to get those considerations now, as opposed to studying and later on down the road. And so whatever happens in terms of these areas have been identified as suitable from biological or social sides, it doesn't circumvent bringing it before the CRMC, it doesn't circumvent it from the SAP process. We would go through the same assent or management process for that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
If we don't have any more questions, we'll move on to our next agenda item. And for that, we have 3 speakers. So I'd like to ask everyone to hold your questions till it will give about 5 minutes after each speaker, just for a quick question. But then after everyone's done presenting, then we can have a larger discussion. So just hold your questions till the end of each speaker and then see how it goes. All right, first we have Patrick.
Thanks. Yeah, my name is Pat Barrett. I'm a biologist with DMF, and I run the quahog dredge survey. So I'm just going to be walking through some of the results from this past season, and then also quickly discussing the harvest and landings before we get into more discussions after that. So this past year, we sampled 67 stations, which encompassed all of Greenwich Bay and the Providence River. This is the second year with our new research vessel. All the methodology and the dredge is the same from years past. I just want to give an update to folks that despite the new vessel, the survey is running the same way. And using identical methods to survey the quahog population. And so on the right here is a map. Each square represents one of the stations that we sample. This is the mean quahog density that we found in the dredge survey this past year. And so the warmer the color, the more quahogs there were. Looks like the highest was 29 individuals per meter squared. And then as you get closer to blue, it's like 1. So these are the stations that we sampled this year. Okay. Oh, sorry. And then this is an update on the 3 different indices that we generate from that dredge survey. This figure is showing the average abundance of quahogs per meter squared on the y-axis, and then on the x-axis is all the years of the survey. And the different colors represent the different indices. Red being the Providence River, green being Greenwich Bay, and blue being the rest of Narragansett Bay. And so after this year, we did see a decrease in the Providence River Index, which is that furthest right red dot. It's around 6 individuals per meter squared, down from about 11 last year. And then there was slight increase in the density in Greenwich Bay. This is the entire Providence River. And next, I'm going to focus specifically on the conditional area where there's harvest. And so that is the figure on the left here, where similar to the last one, this is the observed quahog density from stations that are sampled within the conditional area. Where again, on the y-axis is the quahog density, and then the x-axis is the year. And it shows kind of a similar trend where, for the past few years, the index has been high, and last year there was a slight decline. And then what we wanted to do as well was to kind of get it before we talk about the landings, is to kind of get an estimate of what we think is in the conditional area. And so to get kind of a rough estimate, we took the average station density within the conditional area and multiplied it by the square meters of the conditional area. So basically scaling it up to see what we would expect to be in that. And so that's that figure on the right, where the y-axis is basically the estimated claims in the conditional area for a given year based off of what the dredge survey was. And so I think there's some assumptions that are made in there, just wanted to clarify. So one is that the specific dredge location that we sampled in the station is representative of the whole station. So that varies, it could be higher or lower. And then also that all of our stations don't encompass every section of the conditional area. So these are just estimates, they could be slightly higher, they could be a little lower. For example, there are stations, in the channel that aren't sampled. And so we're assuming they're also representative of other areas, but then there's also areas that are too shallow to sample. So we're also assuming that our stations are representative of those. And so just to get some context, like 2021, the estimate would have been close to 100 million clams, and then this past year could be closer to 50 million. This next slide is based off of the dredge survey. This is just some size class information. It's essentially the frequency, the taller the bar, the more clams at that size class that we saw. The dotted lines are sublegal, little necks, tops, cherries, chowders. And then from top to bottom, it goes from 2013 to 2022. And so as you look down, you're kind of seeing how the population is shifting over the past 5 surveys. And so in 2015, 2017, there were more sublegals in the conditional area. That was one thing that kind of seems to stand out. And then it seems like, at least relative to these past 5 years, there's maybe, the chowders are less abundant relative to the other size classes. And then I will quickly also jump in. So this is the harvest summary in 2022. And then I also have 2021 data up there just for relative comparison. And so the column on the left is 2021, one on the right is 2022. Last year, the river was open 15 out of 30 possible days, and it was 4.7 million clams that were harvested. And this year it was open 28 out of 40 days, and it was 10.5 million clams that were harvested. That number also was 60% of all clams harvested in Rhode Island came from the river. And then essentially the rest of those data points are looking at kind of average landings per day out of the entire fleet, average clams per harvester, essentially a bunch of different metrics looking at effort and participation. And really they are quite similar. And so most of the increased harvest is due to just that. It was almost twice as many days that it was open. And then the pie chart on the right is just showing the breakdown of what the size classes were for the landing. So this is very similar to last year, but 85% Linex, 12.5 top, and then small percents for the rest. So that's it for my stuff. Guess we'll take a question.
I
Yeah,
have one question. So you estimated in 21 that there was 100 million cows. Estimated for 22 was 50 million, but we only harvested 10.5. What do you assume happened to the other 40, 39.5 million cows?
yeah. So this number is generated from just our, mean survey indice, which does have its own variability. And it's also, so the year before there was 100 million, and that's based off our dredge survey, which takes place after the summer harvest, at least for Providence River. And so there was 100 million. Yeah, I think there's just, sometimes some variability in, scaling that up.
So the
But
dredge
it's-
survey variability in your survey data or accuracy, and what can we attribute that to?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So there's 10.5 million that were harvested, and just based off of after that harvest occurred, based off of what our industry currently stands, it's estimated that there's 50 million there. Yeah.
So, okay,
So we're basing everything that we're doing moving forward on estimates.
No, this is not, this was just to provide context of,
'Cause those numbers don't jive. They really don't, they don't jive at all. That's a big gap. We're talking about a lot of clams now. That's a big one.
If you're talking about the severe shrinkage of biomass, wouldn't you expect catch per unit effort to decline? It actually went up a little bit. And I get there's variability, but it was the same number of hours. There wasn't any big changes. If you're a 50% decline in biomass, you should see some change.
Yeah, so like you said, the effort wasn't that much higher. It was slightly higher.
I mean, I'm looking at the number per person, so
Yeah.
regardless of effort. Because that's gonna be your better indicator of what's in the bottom. Can't really, you pull it right through the bottom as fast as you can do it.
Yeah, I will mention it's also this is based off of the observed density of the dredge survey. It doesn't include any, sediment calibrations and things like that. And this was just to provide context, for discussion, when thinking about how much of this harvest, what portion of the clams that are there is the harvest number, just to generate, some numbers to think about. This is not meant to dictate, the discussion.
But isn't this the number they're gonna work over?
Right.
No,
No? Okay, so we have another number coming?
yeah, okay, so with that, let's
Right.
move on to our next presentation, and then maybe we can all kind of come together.
Can I just try to put this in layman's terms for myself?
Okay.
If I have a probe that's about 1.5 feet wide, and I pull it 6 feet, translating into meters, whatever, that's about a square meter. So if I take a rake and pull it 6 feet, I have not put my rake down since that opened and gotten less than 6 feet. So I don't understand whether it looked like you had it 6 to 8 cohorts per square meter in the river.
Okay,
yeah,
let's hold on
Is
for
that how
more
I
questions.
just want to know.
yeah, so that's just an average of all the stations.
So if I pull a bull rake 1.5 feet wide, approximately 6 feet, I'm covering over a square meter. And the cohogs I get out of that 6 feet is, I've never seen 6 to 8 clams with 6 foot of cohorts, knowing that it's at least 50 everywhere, even the worst spots. I leave spots that are, so I don't understand if the dredge is less efficient than a bull rake. this number of 6 days, that's where we need it. I'm not seeing that in my reg anywhere, and I'm not the best bidder.
All right, let's hold off on questions. For now.
Is that a correct layman's analogy of how a square meter looks?
Excuse me, sir. We're gonna move on to the next presenter.
Oh, you just say yes or no, that would be easy. And
We're gonna hold off. You can ask your question. Okay. Thank you, Pat.
Okay, we'll change gears just a little bit. My name is David Walkman. I'm in the water resources section of DEM, and we're the group that does the conditional area for the rainfall. Also monitors shellfish growing areas for bacteria. So I'd like to cover these 3 main points. A quick review of what conditional areas are. A little summary of the 2022 year as far as rain closures go. And then a simulation of what it would look like if you could go back in time with different harvest schedules and get an estimate of how many days the area of Providence River would be open under different management scenarios. So just starting out, 2 pictures very similar to what Pat just showed, right? The most quahogs are up here at the freshwater end of any estuary, including Narragansett Bay, for lots of reasons. And that's great, but it becomes complicated when all the people in the parking lots and the roads, like this picture of the Thurber's Avenue curve after a huge rainstorm. And those 2 things come together, you can have problems, right? Runoff from the rain, it's into the bay, it's into the shellfish areas, and cause problems. Okay. Next. Okay. All right, so this data is fecal coliform, which we use as an indicator of potential pathogens coming in from the land too. In this case, this is a bunch of stations in Area 16 on the Providence River. This is part of the work we had to do to justify to the FDA how this area responds to wet weather. So there's 2 bars you see here. Blue is wet weather, so that's within a few days of a rainstorm of more than a ½ inch. The kind of grayish stippled ones, that's in dry weather, hasn't rained in a while. Up top, that horizontal line, that's the 14 fecal coliform per 100 mils, which is the threshold that FDA wants you to stay below. So as you can see in wet weather, some of the stations either approach or exceed that threshold. That's how we came up with the ½ inch limit that the area was safe to open. So the FDA recognizes you can do an next one there. That there are lots of places in the country that they're great shellfish areas in dry weather, but they exceed the public health standard in wet weather. So those areas under this language that's convoluted in the NSSP essentially says, if you can demonstrate, you know, when they're acceptable and when they're unacceptable, and you close them, you can run areas as conditional. And in Rhode Island, there's 6 places that close at these different rain thresholds. Okay, so if you can demonstrate that they're good in dry weather, exceed in wet weather, you can close during the wet weather and be open in the dry weather. Okay, next, please. Okay, so shifting gears now, we're going to start to summarize under this ½ inch rain closure. This is rain data from 2011 to last year, 2022. And it's annual rainfall at TF mean. That's what we use when we do a closure. We check every hour at TF mean. And over here is the number of days that the Providence River would be open on a year-round basis. Okay, and so you see huge variation, right? In a dry year like 2015, you might be open something like 252 days, are eligible to be open. A wet year like 2011, it's down to 142. For reference, this green triangle, that's the middle. That's average rain about 48 inches, averaging somewhere just under 200 days eligible to be open. Also for reference, right? Recent memory, 2021 and 2022. Both came out pretty darn close, but think of the 2 summers. 2021, rain a ton, right? Lots of closures. Summer 2022, almost all of July open. So they ended up the same, but the timing of the rain also matters. So those of you who are into statistics, just the rain explains about 65% of the variance. The next factor that explains a big chunk is how much the closures overlap. Because you have so you have 1.5 inches rain in a month. It could be 3 7-day closures, or they could be back to back to back, overlapping and only 9 days closed. So it's a lot of little things affect this number. But the main thing, look at the variability, wet, near, dry. Thanks. This is sort of a mess. I know you can't see the specifics. If you're not used to these box plots, just think of them as the range from the minimum number of days open in each month of the year from January, February through to January during 2011 to 2012. So this would mean that December, one of the Decembers had only 3 days open. You know what year that was? Last year. December of last year was barely open. To a range of 31. You know what year that was? The prior December, no closures in December. So the point of this is that by month, there is no strong seasonal pattern in rain closures at a 1/2 inch. It's all over the place. Your eye might see these few months. If you separate those 4 months separately, they are open less frequently than the rest of the year. So no consistent pattern really at a 1/2 inch. Next, please. This is the same exact data from here up that you just saw just in the table. And again, lots of numbers in one place, just coded to give you a sense of the variability by month. Red dots or red shaded means the area was open 3 days or fewer in that month. So December of going across 2013, area E, Providence River would have only been open 3 days. As I said, 2 years ago, it was open all 31. So really variable, no real difference month to month. Okay. All right, so now switching gears, all that was kind of an overview from 2011 to 2012. Oh, and the reason I picked those years, one was practical. The older data was in a kind of obscure format that's hard to get into what we use for statistics and plotting now. And the other is there's some evidence that rain patterns have changed gradually, so it might not make sense to be looking at rain from 50 years ago to make decisions for next year, for example. Right. Okay, so what this is a close-up of 2022 from January 1st to the end of the year. If you see a green bar, the area would be open, okay, under a 1/2 inch 7-day rain closure. The red bars, that's daily rain, that TF green in inches, okay? So you go along through the winter, you see green, white, open, close, open, close, open, close. A good stretch of green, meaning open a long time in May, June. And then this stretch right here, from July 6th to August 23rd, last summer, it was open 48 days straight, right? That was when your lawn was turning brown. There wasn't much rain. The details are here. There was only a 1/2 inch of rain versus a normal 3.3 in July of last year. So again, variability, dry streaks, wet streaks. Hard to predict when the area is going to be open if you're trying to determine a fishery model. Next, please. Pat kind of covered this. This is the same chart from before, showing the different, essentially the days open if it was open daily in each month of the year of 2022. Potential fishery days under the commercial fishing schedule from last year, right? Started in May. You had 3 or 3 days in May. Got a little rainy in June, July. Every one of the 8 days was open. That was eligible under the fishery schedule. 70% in August, and then it would return to normal, and only 1 of the 3 in December. Okay.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Actual days open, is that, yeah, that one?
Yes. So that would be
one, is that like, if it was like 1 day per week, or is that just the days in that month?
Yeah, let me walk you through it. So this is May, right? The area opened like May 23rd.
Yeah.
And on the schedule that was in the regulation, there were 3 potential May commercial harvest days.
Okay.
And in this case, because of the rain schedule, all 3 of those, the area was open. Right, and then you went to June, there were potentially 10 days on that schedule when it got published, but only 4
that the rain allowed it to be open. Then you get in the dry spell here, and there's a lot of open days. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay, cool. Next, please. All right, so you got this problem, right? The rain is all over the place. We're trying to set a fishery schedule. What we tried to do was merge two data sets. The rain closure going back about 12 years, and then you could look at different fishery schedules, 1 day a week, the 2022 schedule, the 2021 schedule, and get some kind of prediction of the range of variability in days open for those 12 years. Okay, next, please. So I'm going to just walk through 4 straightforward schedules. The first one's very easy conceptually, at least for me. What if you were open 1 day a week year round? Okay, so if it never rained that whole year, you get 52 days of fishing, right? But just to get it in your head. In reality, you average about 26 or 27, about 50% of the time, the area will be open. And it doesn't matter, I didn't go into the ANOVA that compares it. Each day of the week, whether you picked a Monday or a Tuesday, whatever, there's no difference statistically. You're going to end up at about 26, 27 days open per year at a half-inch rainfall. Okay, next, you say, well, so like in some of the schedules last year, you could say Tuesday or Thursday, Monday or Wednesday, Wednesday or Friday. Not both, either or. If you do that, you end up year round with a half-inch rain closure. You end up at 30 to 32 days per year. So you're gaining about 6 days per year. You're also moving away from that 50% figure. You're adding a contingency. You're saying, if not this, if it's closed Monday, I'm going to go Wednesday. Sometimes the closures end saying Monday at noon, then you'd be eligible on Wednesday, like that. So when you do this kind of contingency, you're getting away from the 50% open figure. Next, please. This one is kind of what applied in December, where you say 1 day a week first available. If it's closed Monday, closed Tuesday, closed Wednesday, but open Thursday, you go on the Thursday that week. Next week rolls around, it's open on a Wednesday, say, you go that way. So you're getting 1 of 5 chances to open, you're getting more chances. If you do that, you're up to 36 days per year if you did it year round. The range, if you look at the different years, is from 29 to 42. So again, you're moving away from that 50% because you're giving alternatives. If it's closed Monday, I'll try Tuesday. If it's closed Monday and Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, and so on. So you're getting more opportunities under this scenario. The next one is the last one. It's more complicated because the schedule that was picked in 21 and 22, right, was centered around different holidays. For example, you wanted to be out more frequently the week or so before Memorial Day and 4th of July. So what we did was went back in, changed the 21 and 22 schedule to weeks of the year and applied that back in time 2011 to 2022. If you do that, here's the different years, the number of days that the area would have been open in 2022 schedule, 2021 schedule, and then a 2021 with this 27 day cap that was there. And you end up with about 28 days if you follow on average the 2022 schedule going through those years. The 2021 schedule, you end up with 4 days open, about 22, 23. That's just a picture of it. Okay, I know I've thrown out a lot of numbers. The idea is whether you pick a fixed schedule, if you pick a fixed schedule, you're going to hover around that 50% closure rate. Once you add contingencies like first available or this or that, you deviate from that. And the summaries are here. It came into 4 groups, the ones I presented, 22 days on average under the 2021 schedule, about 26, 27 days, 1 day per week fixed year round, or the 2022 schedule, and the other one shown there. That's basically it, but we have this set up. If it's of interest to run some other scenarios, like whatever you come up with, we can use this data set to look at that and at least get a sense of the variability in days open per year. So,
would these be available for public? Could we get copies of these?
I was actually going to ask if we could get these sent to us.
Tomorrow,
Listserv.
it's going to be listed.
It's listserv?
These slides.
Okay.
Yeah, typically, I could look at but typically we post the slideshow and the recording. You know, the recording might take another day, but ideally both would be up tomorrow, but we definitely have the slideshow up. So if you go to the website and navigate through the council to the meeting, that's what we usually.
But it'll be on the listserv, we get that sent to us anyway, right? On the listserv. Okay.
Well, usually, yeah, we can list or we put the slides on our calendar where the event is. So either way, we'll get it publicly to you guys and we can do it, you can do both.
So they might send you a link in the listserv
Yeah.
to the calendar, or you can check the calendar on your own,
Okay,
and then that will be.
great, thank you, thank you.
You explain the difference between your second and third scenario?
Sure.
Way to catch it.
Yeah, because it almost looked the same to me, yeah.
So that one. This one is a fixed schedule, so each week rolls around, you could go either Monday or Wednesday, Tuesday or Thursday, or Wednesday or Friday.
So it's harvest 2 days per week, not one.
No, or,
Okay.
It's still a 1 day per week.
it's still 1
That's
day
it.
per week. So the most you would,
Are you choosing in advance which 2 days are eligible?
in these, yes.
Yeah.
So I said, say you said it's Monday, Wednesday. I went through the whole mess.
Yeah.
Monday, Wednesday only, came up with these numbers each year. Then the next one was Tuesday or Thursday, same thing, go through the whole set, we came up with these numbers. So the maximum you could get would be 52 days.
Yeah.
1 day per week times 52.
Yes. So you just get, in the third scenario, you're just getting rid of, it's just the first open day.
Yes, so the next one is exactly that. Right.
And that's essentially random on the weather too, right? Because that was for those years, but like we said, you can't predict next year. So whatever,
No, you can't predict it, but you can tell,
but you
you can see the rate, you're gonna probably be between 19 and 33 on this.
yeah.
You get a sense of those essentially error bars around. But you're right, there's no guarantee.
Right.
You could get 3 super dry years in a row and be open the max each year, or you could get 3 soakers.
I just have to say, excellent job on all your data. It's very intense, a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, anyway. Oh,
Now, the Providence River is based on a half inch at Green Airport,
yes,
not Providence and stuff.
correct. Unless the TF Green is down, we can use a gauge at Narragansett Bay Commission as a backup. But we can't access that data easily on weekends and holidays. And we have to do this, all the time. So TF Greens are
Okay.
go-to.
One of my concerns is, I have the last population density map, which has area A and B in it. And everything in area B is in the blue and very low density, population density. So in consideration of what Mark Gibson had said in a 2010 report, he said that the data indicate both a limiting density below which recruitment is impaired, less than 1.5 per meter. And a critical density below which there may be no recruitment is 0.7 per square meter. Gametes do not occur at low density. Then establish conclusively that recruitment overfishing occurs when stock declines. That's what I believe is happening in A and B. We've maybe seeing some recovery. But at the other end of the spectrum, it was found that dense population in areas close to fishing, which would be the Providence River, do not achieve the same reproductive output of clams in less dense fished areas. This calls into question the long-held belief that dense aggregations of quahogs in closed areas serve as a broodstock for downstream fished areas. So I went back to the report as to what the density is, and that's why I asked what my bull rate would represent as a square meter. And it gives you the number here is what is optimum for reproduction per square meter. And this is a previous report that Mark Gibson referenced. And this says, our results indicate the reproductive ability of the animals in closed areas in the Narragansett Bay, Providence River, and coves is limited because a small proportion of animals are reaching the ripe and spawning stages of development, whereas in the conditional areas, cohogs are actively reproducing, beginning gonadal development for the next year, as evidenced by the presence of gonads in the early stage of development at the beginning and at the end of the sample. And then this is what I don't believe on the page.
Excuse me, do you realize that this guy is water quality?
Well, let me just,
It has nothing to do with, this is completely different than.
okay, no, this.
I know you're trying to do what you wanted to do. And you didn't do all this later.
Okay, but it says here that optimal reproduction for quahogs is, quoting the science, is a density of 5 quahogs per square meter.
Is that Mark Gibson's, call?
No, this is about a previous study. But this is the accepted science. It's 5.
I want to be here 4 hours.
Sure.
I'm just saying that none of, have you seen 5 quahogs? They're trying to reduce our.
I don't think you understand what the survey meant. You can't, every time you put the rake in the water, doesn't mean you're gonna get 6 call.
I'm citing, this was done with a bull rake, this study. It says it, done by a bull rake. The latest stuff is the dredge survey. This 5 quahogs per square meter was attained with a bull rake. That's optimal for reproduction. So every time they close the Providence River, we've got to go exploit an area that's, if anything's overfished, it's A and B. So I'm just proposing that it's open at least until we get close to this 5 quahogs per square meter. We're nowhere near it, and all these restrictions are coming.
But within that decision, the water quality applies, so. Right, you cannot be open when it's not gonna meet public health
I'm not
standards.
talking about the water quality. I'm just saying,
But I,
That's what we're talking about now. We want to get the next step.
I understand the water quality is on. But we lost a lot of days. November, it was
There's a little
closed.
lot of time right now. We're going
And all
on the
these
same
should
shit.
have been open too, but it's not.
yeah, I mean, this, within that decision and your comments, you can only harvest there when it meets the water quality standards. Yeah.
Yes, Dennis.
Yeah.
This would be good for a side conversation. Have you met Dr. Rice
I have,
to your right?
I was at
So
a
he's
meeting.
the scientific advisor for the SAP. Maybe this would be something you two can kind of talk about, and if you have something that you'd like to ask the
So
council
you
to
don't.
discuss, but
Relevant.
not right now, it doesn't really fit with the
Of course it
discussion.
does. All of what. the-
Unless you're trying to like commandeer this entire discussion, can I please ask you to
Thank
just hold it till the end, discuss with Mr. Wright, and come back with some coherent recommendation that we can all discuss together? Because it's not fair to everyone in this room who's giving up their time for you to,
Well, we're all-
you made this point clear at many meetings.
And the resource is not growing, and we used to be 90% of the industry.
Oh, okay,
That's it.
thank you.
Not your turn.
Sorry.
All right, so for those of you I have not met yet, my name is Connor McManus, Chief of Marine Fisheries. I'm gonna go through really quickly the simulator stuff that you talked about before. You know, and I want to emphasize 2 things today. One, that a division proposal is a proposal at that right now. I'm trying to hopefully get people to think about structuring how the SAP would want to provide a proposal when you all meet next time. Thinking about days, fixed or rolling, months, days a week. That's the point of this discussion right now tonight. We have proposals from ourselves in terms of rough estimates of days that we would suggest to build a schedule around. But I also want to note to you all as well that this is a division proposal. Though there may be 1 or multiple proposals that you all present to the council out of the SAP. So just like last year, the goal here is to give you a sense of what we're thinking about in terms of the system, as well as help stimulate thought. And you'll also see in the slides that we have gotten feedback from all types of members from industry. And I just tried to synthesize those really quick of what we've heard over the last year, just for food for thought for you all, just in case you can discuss whether you agree with it or not, but just so we can convey to you as the agency from what the public or other harvesters are telling us anyway. So just wanted to preface that. Okay, so I won't really dive into this too much, but because you've heard this from me for 3 years in a row now, but basically in terms of trying to guide harvest for the Providence River, the ultimate goal is that the ultimate tool we're using is this simulator that basically tries to understand average catch for an individual in the river when people go up, and then how many people show up on a given day. And what we're ultimately doing is saying, based on that variability in catch rates, with our perceived belief of what we can harvest from the river, how many days would that equate to in a given year? And so as we've been moving forward with the area open, we've been using multiple years of data now, 21 and 22, to inform that. And then basically we're kind of running this simulator 1,000 times, or thousands of times, to basically vary. On a given day, you could have 100 people show up or 200 plus show up. So trying to get that variability to inform our understanding of what could happen. So I think Pat might have talked about some of this data already, but I just want to hit it really quickly in the interest of time. And I can always circle back if you want, but here's the number of licenses that fished each of the days over the last 2 years. You can see some of the variability there, in that we did actually see they're generally the same patterns each year, the same average number of people. Obviously, the maximum increased in 2022, and same thing here. We were looking to basically see, in a seasonal basis, do we see catch rates increase in summer versus winter, and would that be, if they were different, how do we use that to inform a winter schedule for December or November, for example, or the summer end? Effectively, we see the same catch rates regardless of the season, as well as we don't see any differences in catch rates across the 2 years. So this is kind of the similar plot I've showed in the past. When you use that simulator based on an estimated number of quahogs to harvest, this is kind of the variability you get. So this is all 1,000 runs run at one point, with the dashed line representing that the total number of days of harvest under that scenario with the variability. So this might say 14 days, but with the maximums of, it's anywhere in there, could result in the catching the maximum sustainable yield, which we had in our previous modeling assessments was somewhere around 4.5 million clams. And so that's kind of like the bird's eye view of like then taking number of days and then translating it to a schedule. So we would say somewhere between around 14 days is what we would recommend as a 50th percentile, understanding that anywhere in this realm could get you to 4.5 as well, depending on the catch rate. So if you remember last year, we had a similar plot, and the SAP, I believe, recommended a more risk tolerant approach based on the distribution and looking towards the farther right, and I believe it was 20 days last year, for then assuming a 50% closure time, increasing it to 40. So that was just for background. Okay, so this is just feedback we got from harvesters over the year, trying to think about moving forward. And I'm not saying that their feedback is based on biology strictly. Some of it's market, some of it's enforcement concerns, all of the above. But I just wanted to share this with you all because this is what we hear. And as the advisory panel, I thought it was prudent for us to share that with you all. So in terms of feedback to think about for the upcoming year, some of the things we heard was that the 3-day openings really worked. Don't switch to something like a 3-hour openings versus a 2-hour. Stick with the 3 for logistics of the area. We got varying feedback on whether 2 days was good or would 1 day have been better, particularly during the dry spells of the year last year. There was certainly some concern about effort from some people up in the river. So there were suggestions like, should we consider 1 license a boat instead of 2 for this area specifically? Should we think about strategizing 2 versus 1 day a week before and after Memorial Day or June or after July 4th? And then we did hear some other things regarding concerns like, should there be, whether you have a schedule set up or not, should you have like a contingency plan? So for example, if you have 3 weeks that are really dry and the market can't handle it, or there's concerns of overharvest, should there be a backstop to say we should pause then for the next 2 weeks if there's 3 weeks of non-closure days in July and August, for example. Then we also heard other scenarios of a daily limit of closure of days. So if it's open 15 days, 20 days, 25 days, whatever it may be, should, no matter what, then it close until December opening. So these are all just feedbacks we got, as well as various concerns about whether people were taking clams, and holding them over and selling them the next day, as opposed to selling them on the day that they harvested, or not reporting their landings altogether. So these are concerns these are comments that I'm bringing to you all. to help maybe formulate your discussion, but, yeah. Jim.
Honor, just a point of clarification. When you say only one license per boat, I think you're indicating one limit per boat. For example,
Sure,
the division has already established precedent with the striped bass fishing. You could have 2, 3, 4 licensed fishers in a boat, but you can only have 5 fish total in the boat.
correct,
That's a limit, not
Correct.
licenses.
yes, yeah.
Because you're gonna have guys who. Maybe they're hurt, their boat's down, they're gonna go out, they have a license, they're gonna be with another licensed fisherman. Maybe they're just gonna call for them and pick,
Mhm.
and maybe he pays them 10% or something like that. But it's one limit in the boat, is what I think you're trying to get to.
Yes, thank you, Jim. So that's correct. It's not to say that another licensed fisherman could not be on the boat. The point, the guidance was more so one limit per boat within the area. But again, even to that comment, we also understand the efficiency and the need for some people to have to, and we understand both sides of that. But this was just some of the discussion and feedback we heard. Yes, Tom.
In consideration that the boat is not the licensed entity, the individual is,
Correct.
to me, it seems to not make sense to put it on the building. What's the carbon footprint coming from Whitford?
So
I mean,
it's a
team up and go out together. I will still go if I have to take my boat. If it's windy, I can go with a friend. We're still gonna get the same amount of stuff.
So there's a whole plethora of reasons of why 2 licenses per boat is or any tool like that, increasing efficiency is helpful. I'm not saying no to
Just
that.
saying the boat is not licensed, the individual.
I got one more slide and then I'll go to Brandon and who's over here? Oh, okay. So I'll- Yeah, so then this is in for context. So based on the simulator, if we said like one division per boat, like the division's not wed to days when we start, when we end, but this is one example of a schedule that we would put forth this type of schedule to the council for consideration. Again, not finalized in stone, but something that would try and meet both biological as well as some of the feedback that we've heard to date. So something like every Tuesday and Thursday, 2 days a week, from the week before Memorial Day through June, then moving to 1 day a week, July through August, and then a December opening like we had last year. And if there were massive increases in the number of days that were allowed or that the SAP proposed, we may think about these contingencies to try and provide some reprieve for the stock, as well as address some of the concerns that have been raised. But and then the other thing I wanted to mention is that we haven't really, as a division, well, 2 things, I guess. One, I don't want to speak for Dave, but you know, the division's preference is a fixed schedule for a number of reasons. Primarily, the biggest one is confusion. It's not clear to the industry at large on this rolling schedule when it's open, when it's closed. I know that the volume of calls that we received was huge, as well as Dave alluded to in the presentation, that the fixed days, as you start to roll, it's unclear. The idea of that 50% or whatever percent in a given year of what may or may not be open is now violated, because you're providing more options as you go through each week on a given day or on a given schedule. So I just wanted to say that from the Division Marine Fisheries perspective, a fixed day schedule would be much more preferable than this rolling schedule, except for December. I mean, that's something that I think we can handle at that time of year. And then I did want to bring up recreational, because I didn't get exact feedback on how to improve it or not, but I know that there was some concern from harvesters about the current recreational openings. But I just wanted to, if this would be a time if the staff had recommendations on the recreational measures as well. And not to put you on the spot, Jeff, but if you had anything to share from rec or schedules.
Yeah, like you said, enforcement would prefer to have a set schedule, not based on the rainfall, and it just makes it easier to plan. We're really busy in summertime, so the schedule of boats to be out there on those days is certainly much easier when you have more than 7 days notice. As far as recreational, we would like to see it stay status quo. To expect a recreational fisherman to follow the open enclosures, and then whether or not that is a consecutive day is just a lot to ask for a recreational fisherman. And if we did make them abide by that standard, we would have constant calls up there for people digging on closed days. And our only options in that, it's a misdemeanor charge. We're certainly not going to charge someone a misdemeanor for not being able to follow a very concrete schedule. So like we're gonna get a warning. It's a lot of effort for our officers to go up there constantly to shoot warnings.
And I did.
Question,
Oh, yeah.
is it currently open recreation? Is it 7 days a week with just water quality concerns, basically?
Yeah.
So I thought it was 100 and something days open, so I figured that's how we got there.
I'm sorry, say that one more time, the last part?
I saw it in the water quality presentation,
Oh.
that recreational was open for it was 100 and something days, so.
Right.
I figured that was 7 days a week outside of water quality.
Yeah, and the year before we had it tied to the commercial schedule, and the feedback was the tides didn't match this, the commercial schedule, so it almost made it impossible to recreate.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I knew how it was now.
And then last thing, these are things that I didn't touch in the simulator. If we wanted to think about those before the next meeting, we could try and run them as well, but this is just based on the feedback to date. So now I'll stop, I promise, and then I'll go, Brandon, I'll go around, but yeah.
Just curious on the feedback that you were getting.
Yep.
Is that from other fishermen, dealers, or like, how are you getting this feedback? Where is it coming from?
Harvesters, so not so much dealers, so.
So harvesters are like emailing to them or calling them,
Both, yeah, email, call, yeah.
and that's what they're relaying that.
That's some of their feedback. Is that representative of the whole industry? That's, I think, part of the SAP's,
Yeah.
deliberation, but that's, typically in our Marine Fisheries Council process, we provide the comments, whether written, oral, as we can to, whether it's a workshop, advisory panel, the council, hearing.
Now, are we talking like 10? Are we different comments?
Several.
Yeah.
Yeah. People fish year round, people who don't. All types of people. But again, it's my purview to, or my.
No, I
you guys, whether,
I'm just curious on where it's going.
whether it should help inform your decision, that's.
Yep.
Up to you guys. Yes, Jerry.
You made a comment about you want a fixed schedule, Foster wants a fixed schedule. Does your proposal, does it reflect that?
Yes,
A fixed schedule?
yes,
And that spike you had, those are the proposed days you want right there with the dotted line?
oh, yeah, that was the. Yeah.
Flew right by it.
Oh, yeah, I heard a comment of speed, so I was trying to be.
No, I appreciate it, but is
Yeah.
that 14 or 50? Because there isn't,
14,
okay.
yep, sorry about that, yes, and there's some of the numbers there, yeah. But the range is out of date, I think it's just 9 to 31.
Could you explain that graph one more time? Because that
Yeah.
kind of lost me a little bit.
Totally, sorry about that. So what we do is, so we'll say, every day, a different number of people will show up to the river, right? And every individual who harvests is different, has different efficiency. Some are really good diggers, some
Right.
less, not as good. So what we do basically is if we say, based on like a total number of harvests that we're trying to achieve, we basically iteratively, first in one run, we'll say, randomly draw how many people could show up. So typically the min and max of what we've seen from 21 to now. And so maybe in that one, it's 150. And then it says of all the people who have dug up there, randomly select a catch rate for them. And so then it says from that range that Pat showed earlier, like a number of different like catches within 3 hours.
Okay.
And then it says, let's do that random draw 10 or 1,000 times or 10,000 times. And that's all these different iterations piled together. And so you kind of have over 10,000 numbers or 1,000 different numbers, like you have this range of days that it could, that would correspond to. So on average, or not average, 50%, the 50 percentile, the middle value is that dashed line. So like if you went, I'm just ballparking, like if you were like 20 to 23 days, you'd be in like a 75th percentile and so forth. So like, because
So the line that designates like the biomass, and then the further we get along in days, it's supposed to, gradually comes down.
oh, if you were to go higher days, you would lead to one of two
Biomass
things.
comes down.
Or sorry, this way. If you did fewer days, your biomass would go down. If you go more days, you go up. The other way to think about it is like, if you were to go with the 20 days, you know, you're more likely to exceed the biomass recommendation from the division. But it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Now, on that, you are taking the biomass number from that young man in the corner there, his dredge surveys, which there's a discrepancy in the number. So the number here is gonna be skewed.
Sorry, no, so the previous maximum sustainable yield was based off the stock assessment we ran through 2020. And that was that 4.1 million number. If you were to say, for example, I think that like the average of the last year's catches is more of like what's sustainably harvestable. That's like 7.1, 7.2 million clams. That would move this line to like here. Right. So that's it, the lines are reflective of what we also think the sustainable harvest for the population is. So for example, and if you moved it, if you said, I thought it was 7.1, that would correspond to about 20 days, right?
Yeah.
Conversely, if you thought about it in that 14-day context, you could say, I am like, here is basically saying 50% of the time you're going to be right on spot with your 4.1. If you move here, there's a much less, you know, half as much likely that you'll hit 4.1 and you'll go and you'll harvest more. It's like just the inverse of thinking about it.
Okay.
So just trying to provide, when we do a day, right? It's admitting that there's uncertainty in the day.
Right.
Both on, in this scenario, it's mainly based on effort and catch effort. You know, how many people show up on a given day and how much people dig. You could think about that in the inverse though of the MSY if you wanted to. So again, if you thought it was more, like if there was an industry that said, it's fine, the division thinks it's 4, but we think it's 7, or we think it's something else. That's another way to kind of think about the distribution.
So were you just essentially saying that 14 days is what it should be with that chart?
That would be our, it's 14 harvestable days, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
That, but how you get
With
there.
that, yeah, biomass number.
Yeah.
So the 4.1 million national sustainable yield,
Yeah.
that was from the data up to 2020.
Or 2021 we did not rerun the model this year with the new data based
So-
on timing of when landings were validated or verified and getting everything squared away. So that's from 2 years ago, which is pretty common in almost all fisheries management. They don't typically run assessment models every year, but that's a different discussion. But yes,
Right, so that's that you're assuming 4.1
yes, right.
moving forward. That's not just
Well,
held over.
for this, we're assuming 4.1 is still the MSY based on the previous time we ran the size structure assessment. Now, is that different now? Maybe, but you know, typically in these fashions, again, a regular fisheries management plan, you'll run the assessment and then set specs in 5 years or something like that. And so in this, like, oftentimes because we don't have the data verified in time to run the model again. And that's one example. That's what's happened this year. So this 4.1, for example, does not include last year's harvest or the index change, as an example. which. Yes,
Is there any discussion on the soft shell clams being open?
excuse me,
Is there any discussion on the soft shell clams being opened?
I have not heard any feedback on that. Yeah,
So that MSY.
yep,
The 4.1.
Yep.
That's your recommendation of what the total of what we should take out based on your research.
correct, right,
So we took out 10.5
correct.
last year. You're saying for this year, you would recommend only taking 4.1.
The recommendation of the MF, based on the MSY, is the same as last year. Yeah, that's, the recommendation on that total has not changed.
And that number has nothing to do with the dredge survey.
The dredge survey is used as an input to that model. So part of the discussion about how bumpy it was, you know, going 100 million clams to million to 50 million. That index is, like most surveys, is shoved in the model to help tune with the population, is because
Yeah, but the dredge went from 100 million to 50 million, but your MSY is
we didn't run the model again at 50.
okay.
So we didn't run it through.
So
2022.
if you ran it through, your potentially it would go down to like 3.5 or something.
It depends. It may go down, yeah, or slightly, or not, or substantively, but the model also takes into account how fast they grow, how much they spawn, what's the natural mortality. It takes, like, you know, harvest not just by total, but by size class, and what the recruitment is tied to that. So, and that's typically why, like in fisheries, we tend to not try and base solely the index off of to inform management, because of the interannual variability that Pat described, as well as the uncertainty when you scale one tow to hundreds of thousands of kilometers, which, like, is a pretty common practice for fisheries along the East Coast, but it's mainly because they don't have the data to support us a fancy stock system model. Like, we don't know how fast they grow, die, etc.
Thanks.
I'll go you, then Mike.
Okay. I was, this year, I would like, whatever recommendation we go with, I think we should have something in place to mitigate for the price, because our price is still down than what it was before the pandemic started. And now that the pandemic started, the cost of doing business and the cost of living has gone up through the roof. And our price is still less than it was before the pandemic. So we need to have something in place to keep it so that at the very least, the price doesn't drop even more.
Sorry, what's your name? Sorry, just
Kyle.
Kyle. So thanks for that. So what do you like? Could you give like an example then? Just
Either, you mentioned a few things that fishermen recommend,
yeah.
either reducing the hours or reducing the days. As long as there's something in place so that if the price drops below what it is now, we have something so that it doesn't like get out of whack and go very low, because we're already getting paid less than we were before the pandemic started.
Okay.
We're not back at the same economic status that we were before that.
Everything else went up.
Exactly.
Everything else every product in the entire world has gone up except for quahog. What I get for quahog.
Yeah, but everything gas.
So I turn on gas, so that's more of an expense to myself, and now my pay as well.
Yeah, but you're expecting a company that is getting rid of the product not to incur any more expenses?
Well, I'm incurring more expenses too. I'm a business as well, not yours. What about my expenses?
I feel like everyone's taking heat on it.
The price of every single thing in the world has gone up. Why? So why is it that I get paid less?
So it sounds like
The price of the shellfish is going up in the store. They pay more when people buy them.
so it sounds like it may be just for the SAP's thought, you know, it sounds like some type of trigger to try and help.
To try and when the price goes down, because that would tell me too that the markets don't really need it. The price goes down.
I know kind of sort of.
We had before, so you would have like a trigger, like an emergency. I don't think, you've never done it, but it's been discussed.
I think it's
Oh.
discussed. This has been litigated to death, and DM absolutely cannot do this.
Right.
I thought so.
So
It's like,
Economic
you guys,
trigger basing on,
I'll say that, you know, the policy in the past anyway was that the industry could try to choose when they would harvest that would meet management goals, so they get the maximum amount for what they harvest.
but DEM can't get involved in the pricing in any way other than, let's have a co-op.
Well, we reduce the house and make 6 bushel limit more of a challenge for the guys to get, then less would be going on to the market.
Should go to Mike really quick. He's been
Yeah,
patiently.
just, my question is, you know, how, do the recommendations bump up against the calculated MSY all the time? And, yeah, and has there been any thought to like, Daniel Pauly's recommendation to kind of give enough leeway, maybe 50% or maybe 75% of MSY to basically take into account any kind of variability over years that might build up.
Thanks, Mike. If I understand the question correctly, the last 3 votes on the river, 2 were in the same year, 1 was the year last year.
Yeah.
I think they were all, the recommendations from the council were all an exceedance of the MSY or our recommendation, and I think basically bumping up to a 90 to 100% tolerance of uncertainty, right?
Okay.
But if I understand the second part, it's all in a single species model framework. It doesn't,
Right.
there isn't any buffering on the other end for something else. If I understand your question correctly.
Yeah, you've got it. I mean, it's sort of like there's been a kind of, you know, when people have moved to sort of multi-species models and multi-trophic models, they're too data intensive to yield anything of any certainty. So actually the single species model tends to be more useful if you kind of build in if you don't take MSY too seriously and build in some sort of a buffer at the lower end.
I have a question. How often do you see an MSY be 4% of standing stock biomass?
Oh, if you've got very slow growing stocks.
But when you look at the breakdown of size.
Yeah.
Do you notice any correlation? You know, you see right now, it looks like the sublegal population is small, which we're not harvesting.
Yeah.
And the harvestable, sellable population is increasing. Do you think the 4%, does that seem, in your opinion, conservative or?
That would be conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what would you say would be less conservative? I mean, you know, for quahogs, does this generally seem like an appropriate MSY, or do you think this is overly conservative?
No, I think you're fine. If you've got enough retaining of spawning stock biomass, you know, in terms of being left behind, I think you're fine. And 4.5, I think, from the calculations that I did earlier in the 80s, that have stuck in my head from the Greenwich Cove population and the Greenwich Bay populations. I think that's right on track.
What were you assuming the MSY should have been for Greenwich? Percentage.
With that Greenwich Bay population, it was like about 10%.
10%. So basically what we call was harvested last year.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
That's something I'd like to add to this. So Jerry and I were on that shellfish, what was that, Jerry? The sampling team there.
The research fleet?
The research fleet.
Yeah.
When was that? That was 2017, 2016?
16, 17, 18 maybe?
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Now, I remember going up there And I don't know if you were on my boat or somebody was on my boat. And we sampled a lot of the places that I'm currently working.
Mhm.
Okay, and at the time, we were pulling up, of course, full baskets, but it was mostly hogs and tops. Okay, I
Yep.
think the highest net count that we had was somewhere in the 80 range, but that was with a full basket. It was a big basket. It was a 22-inch basket, 1.25 inch spacing. And the set that we're seeing now can't be any more than 3 or 4 or 5 years old. I'm saying 4 to 5 year old by the size of the set. So I don't think that it is as slow growing as you're leading us to believe, because this is a pretty young set. And quite frankly, I'm going over the same areas that I'm working, and they're layered. I mean, it's not like, okay, I dug out this area and I've got to move. I'm going down in the same track lines, the same long and lat lines, and I'm pulling up the same catch. So I think personally, I think that is very conservative, that MSY at 4.1. Just on that alone, because that set is relatively young. Now, getting over towards the bullet side, because I'm been over towards the Green Island side, that is even smaller. And those are, I mean, that's a very small, very young set. So I don't know if that factors into your recommendation or not, but I think it should if it doesn't. Because again, this area, I don't think it's as, again, when we start talking numbers, it's speculation. And it's really hard to speculate on what the exact number of biomass is up there.
Mhm.
And on top of it, if you're going after 14 days, if that's your recommendation to the council, then are you saying, okay, we would be at 14 days and then close it down with a potential of opening, maybe 40 openings? Or is it 14 days period?
That slide had 24 days.
24 days? Okay, yeah. I get.
No worries.
Sometimes, yeah.
But you made an awesome point. I wanted to emphasize in that there does seem to have to have been a recruitment pulse that came through, right? Like when we went up there, 16, 17, 18, they were bigger.
Right.
And in the last few years, they've been much smaller on top.
Right.
So it seems in a positive way that there was a good set recruitment event. And you're right. I mean, I think Cam mentioned earlier, they on average 3 to 5 years is how old they are when they hit 1 inch.
Right.
So depending on where you are in the bay.
So the other thing that I'd like to just point out, and I
Yeah.
don't mean to interrupt the
No,
comment, sorry.
all good. Yeah.
So we're talking about an unprecedented dry summer.
Mhm.
I mean, realistically, it probably is gonna mirror closer to 2021, right, where we lost quite a few days, I believe. Now, that was a wet summer.
I mean, for next year.
Yes,
Okay.
so we're basing it, okay, we had 10 point something percent or 10 point, we went way over the number that you guys like to see.
Oh, yeah,
But we're also talking about a very dry summer as opposed to a normal summer. We typically have more of a 2021 type of a summer where we lost quite a few days. We had the third driest summer on record since they started taking last year.
Yep.
Okay, so, I mean, it almost seems like we're being penalized a little bit, being ultra conservative by that recommendation. Because if we have a normal summer now, we'll probably never get in there. And again, I think for the industry now, the industry really needed this bump. 60% of the clams that was, sold came from that area this year. That's a huge number, right? That was on one of the other slides. That's a huge number.
Correct.
And, I think that those things kind of need to be considered as well, for the industry.
Yeah, so one point earlier too, like on the recruits, I think the only question or maybe even troublesome thought is that in the size comps that Pat showed, you saw those recruits coming, those sublegal, and then we didn't see them this year. So I don't know 3 years from now, 2 years from now, 1 year from now, are we gonna see that set come back? That's like typically in the survey data, that's why we do a lot of measurements to kind of see what the cohorts.
It's hard your very first cohort had next to none too.
Yep.
Wow, and then.
Can I ask a question?
You mind if I'm gonna finish one, just-
Oh, go ahead.
if you don't mind, my apologies. So just to clarify too, the you mentioned penalized, like the 10.7 or whatever that doesn't tie to this figure. That's just a system, that wasn't included in that random draw. And that's why I said 7.1, because that was the average of 20, I'm missing my years, of 2020 and 2021 and 2022. That was the average of those 2 years opposites, like 4 and 10 or something. I was, ballparking. So if you were in a wet versus dry year, that's kind of what that's why I've said 7. Is that
But you understand from a fisherman's standpoint, it almost looks like we're being penalized because we maybe took more than you guys would like to see. And in reality, it's a number that's not really known.
Uncertainties there totally. And I think I guess the way I get your point, and I respect that. I guess I would think the way I would phrase it is that the landings exceeded our recommendation to the council. That's how I would phrase it. Doesn't mean that.
But all things being equal, do you think if we had the same amount of rain days as the previous year, that we would have been still on track at that 7.1 or the previous year's landings? As far as, because to your point, that the catch effort was about the same, actually went up a little bit.
I think two things would have, well, it wouldn't have been 10.5, it might be 7, but the other thing is the rolling days. That depending on the rain, if it rolls, you avoid a closure. And it was dry for so long. So we didn't test that like truly, but I think by Dave's analysis, you can get a sense of that 50% of the time closed open. It doesn't stand true when you roll. So that's
Thank you.
yeah.
The way they made it last year, it wasn't what actually likely for half of the 40 days to be closed. It's less, but because of all the or statements, Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. If you had the way they're wording it now, it says Tuesday or Thursday, you're going to keep close to that 50% probability.
Yes.
I have just to clarify what the recreational rules are on the Providence River. I was under the impression that it was open as long as water quality didn't close it every day, all day.
That's correct.
And under management rules, for catch limits. So we have a possibility going up there 100 days, if whatever days it's open. And it'll only close because of water quality.
Correct. That was a change we made last year.
Right.
Yep. And so I guess I bring it forth because we haven't heard any comments, and it's at the SAP's purview to provide a recommendation to the council. This would be the time if someone had a comment. If status quo is fine, that's more than fine. But this would be the time to, or I guess the next meeting would be the
And you
time.
had to be a short digger, you couldn't use the rate, bull rate.
Short digging. Yeah. I mean, I think the concern in the past was just, well, actually, I'm not sure. There's been, I guess, some concern that maybe there was double dipping of commercial and rec by having it open every day. I don't know that, but I guess that's the question as to whether to even touch it. But we did try to sync rec and commercial that first year. And again, the tides were just not aligned with ours, so it just made it almost unharvestable from like almost standpoint.
Jerry?
Yes.
I just had on the dredge surveys, what's the minimum depth from that you can be successful in?
We can get down to like 30 feet.
Minimum.
We've towed in like 7 or 8 feet.
Okay, can I make a point? You've gotten like way in the shallows?
Yeah, it's supposed to
Beside
be
that?
down, yeah.
Because when I looked at the slide you had, it was like, it's still, as thick inside there.
Yeah.
And the slide didn't look like it looked like it was more bluish than like right along Connecticut and all up inside that little cool there.
Sorry. I was just gonna ask about the dredge. Can you get it like a moon high tide if you get in closer? Because you draw 4 feet of water, right?
I think it draws like, might be a little bit more, but yeah. That's kind of the depth. Yeah, if it was planned around that, you could actually hit shallower ground than we did otherwise.
Yeah.
To the point.
I mean, one more comment for your consideration is that we had at least a dozen calls of people digging half hour to a half an hour past when it closes. On all but one occasion, we went out there and it was just people culling or sorting. There was one occasion where there was someone digging. Letting boats stay out there for hours after the closure time just opens up an opportunity for people to dip that rake in once it clears out of it. They give provision that after an hour, you can't be in possession in Providence River unless you're transiting back to your port.
I was under the impression that it was under management rules, so you could get a half a bushel, half a bushel. No, a quarter bushel, I guess, it's half a 5 gallon bucket.
I'm talking to the commercial guys.
So
After the closure of the 3 hour period. There's a lot of guys sitting there. Time up there.
Because I want to know about it.
Yeah, Mike.
I would make a recommendation really for the next year for the division to maybe request some funds and get to do a very robust dive survey of several areas that have been dredged, so that you can get a very robust calibration of the dredge. I mean, I think that's one of the weaknesses that you have in all of this, that you could probably it will serve you well into the future.
Thanks. I think I agree with you, particularly with the new vessel. I think we should be doing that. We did do it. Dave, Jared, like as part of that project, myself and others dove the transect after we did bull rake tows next to it. We did quadrat sampling, and you could see the difference in efficiency in mud versus hard sand, for example.
Yeah.
Pretty, notably. Now, how does that on the Clambo translate to the new Reliance vessel in terms of efficiency? I think we've improved a bit with the new boat in terms of how we operate, but I think it warrants another study to do.
Yeah, I think you could make a really good case for filling that out, and that will really, I think, really help calibrate your length frequency, data, and really kind of tighten up the confidence intervals.
Yeah, Dennis was part of that too. Yeah.
Yeah, it was done by Dale Levitt, and everyone did it in Greenwich Bay, pretty against it.
Rocky Point, I think we had some.
Yeah, I remember you having to do that.
We have one question in the chat where going to go.
There was just someone who just asked if you could clarify the y-axis.
Yeah. Yep, sorry about that. Density is not quahog density. Sorry about that. It's basically frequency. Like, so if you think about it, like the peak means that's the most, like the peak there is not the 50th percentile average, it's just the most often value seen. So density is just like, it's almost frequency. If you think of like the length frequency plots that Pat showed earlier, it's like another way to express like an occurrence or observation. So sorry about that.
Thanks, Connor.
Any more questions?
And people can call and text you, what time.
Okay, so I guess that wraps it up, but before we go, if you have recommendations that you'd like the panel to discuss and vote on, we'd like to have you send them to DM, Eric.
Yeah, you can send them to me, my email's up there. So this will be posted, we'll let you guys know where it is so you can go and get it. And that's just so we can try to incorporate them, so they're in the materials that go out to the SAP for the next SAP meeting, which is on the 22nd. And so That should be on the calendar. So next SAP meeting is on Wednesday, the 22nd, 4:30 same place here. And that agenda has already been circulated, but we can refresh it. So the SAP at that meeting will make a recommendation to the council on the Providence River Harvest.
Will you send those out in an e-packet, or will they all be new to everyone at the meeting?
No, the goal is to try to get them out by Monday, which is a lot of time, but it's gives you some ability to put eyes on it.
Okay.
So that's why we're setting in that process. So rather than, folks can still come to the meeting with a proposal, but if they have a proposal that they want you all to be able to see and consider ahead of time, that's what that date is. Otherwise, it's probably not going to make the presentation, and they'll have to come and present it.
Actually, that's pretty much what I was gonna say. Is it possible to do it so you don't have a proposal in, you really can't really present one here? You know what I mean? Because of the time, you know what I mean? Everybody comes in with like 20 or 30 proposals, you know, after you have them all in writing. Is the way of saying you have a deadline to get the proposals in?
Yeah, so good question, Jerry. I think our deadline was so that we could have that material and incorporate it into the e-pack and send it out to you all. But I'll look to Connor for the.
So for whatever, and I don't wanna, that's okay, Chair. I don't, the intent of the deadline is so we have time to present, to show people for
No,
discussion.
I like the deadline because somebody comes in, you know what I mean? We're just about to wrap up and they want to present their proposal. And it just, you know, everybody knows what's going on now and they want a proposal and get it in by a certain date.
And you may not land on that. You may land as a group on some other proposal
Right.
as you're discussing. But this gives us time to get information to you all earlier and to have it on the slides for people to chew on as opposed to trying to craft it in the meeting and spending 20 minutes trying to
That's what
type
I
it
mean.
up. Yeah.
I have a quick question about the proposal. Now, I had on emails like that when the Greenwich meeting, so right after the Greenwich meeting took place, a lot of proposals for this. And I didn't hear anything about the proposal I emailed, so I wanted to know where I could find out like how to get the proper way to get a proposal in or who to email.
That's a great question. There's a couple. Oh, did you?
No, go ahead.
Right there.
No, I was gonna say there's a couple probably, you know, similar advice to what Connor's gonna offer. So you can email me at that email address there.
Okay.
So that's the cleanest way. There are other ways, you know, if you submit a proposal to the division, you know, it'll probably find its way to the right person, but it might take.
But I still have time to email you a proposal about the summer, I would imagine, right?
For the Providence River?
Yes.
Yeah, so what we're asking is have it to me by noon, Friday the 17th.
Okay, that's all I needed.
I provide one more part of thought. So, just for the next meeting, there's a number of things that you could move forward with. You could say, we want a proposal. Well, for the council, we'll list all the proposals that we received with the one that you all recommended. You could recommend multiple, like this or that, if you have indifference across multiple. So, I know it's like more complicated, but you don't have to be necessarily wed to one proposal, and you, even if you talk about one that you decide you don't like, we would include that in the minutes of the council too. So they have as much information as possible to make a decision.
Before adjournment, can I ask? No, Dave, when the river's not being discussed or anything, you know, river or any quahog matters, the state of the bay, as far as the water quality, we've been talking about it for about a year.
Well, water quality is a pretty nebulous.
No, just the condition, like how things, you know, have been going, because we got the extra area in Greenwich Bay, which is awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah, shellfish classification wise, we're in the best shape probably in several generations. And that's using fecal coliform as an indicator. So every year we review the monitoring data, and when possible, we work to make upgrades in shellfish classification. So last year, we were able to do that little triangle by Appenell. This year, we're working on 3 small areas. It's early on, we kind of do an internal review. You know, does anybody in fisheries or Department of Health or enforcement have trouble with what we're proposing? We need a little more internal work on that. If it goes forward, there'd be 3 areas that are upgrading from prohibited to either approved in 2 cases or from prohibited to conditionally approved. So it's almost 900 acres.
Yeah, now how about like a future meeting if you can, you know, do your thing, because it was, what you did today was great, and just as far as the different areas and the water quality and potential.
Yeah, whatever, I'm around all the time.
Yeah,
so-
it's great, I just, like I said, as long as that was doing the river.
Yeah, I mean, let the staff know and I can put something together.
I really appreciate it, thank you.
Yes,
David, in that vein, quickly, phase 3 of the CSO project is under construction now, and shortly thereafter, I would anticipate that we might even move the Gaspee Point line farther up, maybe even Sabin Point.
yeah, certainly, for years, we didn't bother monitoring people over north of wild gas, because it's a wild. Right, so we have increased efforts. There is a complication in that. In the NSSP, there's minimum dilution zones outside outfalls.
Right.
So no matter what, you could have samples of no detect for 100 years, and they'll say, we don't want any shellfish taken within the 1,000 to 1 dilution zone. So we know where that line is from the permitting on Fields Point and East Providence and so forth. So those are very hard stops.
Plus Cusset River with 3
Yeah.
wastewater treatment facilities discharging.
So what I would expect is possibly before a geographic expansion would be lifting the rain possibly. Yeah. Which brings up the discussion we just had all over again.
Yeah.
But that's how I would anticipate, but we do check.
I was actually hoping that rain, when you said elevate the rain, I was hoping that was close in Greenwich.
Open the half inch up.
Another time.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes, second. What can we do? Second.
I'll do it. All right.
Thank
Thank you, everyone.
you.